I work in a hospital overnight. I have a partner for a unit of 7 patients. A few weeks ago, my partner was out and a PRN filled her spot. This woman slept throughout the 12-hour shift, knowing we have self-injurious patients on the unit, one of which had to be monitored at all times. I did not feel safe, and I did not feel my patients were safe with her. I explicitly told my supervisor I did not want to work with her again, without giving him specific reasons. My intention was not to get her in trouble. I just was not comfortable working with her, and I don't want to get fired for someone else's negligence. A director, HR, and my supervisor watched the videos from that night and saw her sleeping. I had to meet with them to tell them what happened. Come to find out, a nurse and a patient also saw her sleeping. She was fired, rightfully so. This past Wednesday, the phone rang during the night, as it frequently does, and it's usually nursing. My partner said it was for me. I pick up thinking it's an employee from a different unit offering snacks, as it also frequently happens. I looked at the caller ID to see which unit was calling, and it only showed 4 digits, which I thought was weird, but didn't think too much about it. A woman didn't speak for quite a few seconds, with me saying hello a few times. Finally, she says my name. I answer. Then she starts speaking rapidly, saying, "I'm coming to see you. Stay there, don't leave." I'm just like, okay, thinking I'm not leaving, and what are you coming up here for? Then she says, "I want to thank you for a job well done." Up to that point, I was just confused, but then it clicked. Is this the woman that was fired? Is she really on campus right now? She worked here for years, so she knows the gate code and has friends here, so she could borrow a badge and get into our unit. But then I'm saying, what are you talking about, and who is this? She says, "Stay there, don't run. I'm coming up the hill.
Nobody can save you,"
and hangs up. I quickly tell my partner the contents of the phone call, and she'd heard my side of it. I call the supervisor on duty, and he's not very concerned. He says he'll come by in a little while. I was too scared to look out the windows and see if she was coming up the hill. Honestly, what did she mean by those last few sentences? Is she outside right now with a gun or something? My partner was freaked out too. Just last week, someone called her son from a blocked number and threatened to shoot him at school, so she wasn't taking this lightly. After an hour, I worked up the nerve to look out every window as I made my rounds to check on patients. Thankfully, she did not appear to be on campus, and I didn't get any more calls the rest of my work week. There is now an investigation underway. I've never really gotten a scary call, so this may be tame. I haven't read any other comments yet, but I made sure to call my mom, sister, and boyfriend in case I wasn't coming home that morning. So I live in a pretty quiet part of my city, in a small 2-bedroom basement apartment with my roommate who is gone for the summer. I stayed here and worked during the summer. I do not get out all that often and don't know many people, as I moved to the area 2 years ago. Just this last Sunday night, I was doing my usual gaming with some friends I had met on the internet. Good friends of mine that I had known since I was 16. When I get this call from a private number. Now, I rarely get phone calls from people I know. Normally, communication is done by just texting. So I pick up, and what sounds like a man maybe in his early to mid 40s picks up the phone. The conversation went as follows. "Hello?
"Hey, who's this?"
Who's this?"
"It's Randy."
"Sorry, Randy, you've got the wrong number." I hang up. About 10 minutes later, he calls me again, and so I thought, he must have accidentally dialed my number again. so I ignored it and thought nothing of it, continuing to enjoy my time with my friends, playing some games, Diablo 3. By now it is about 9 p.m. or 9:30 p.m. Around 10 p.m. I get the call again. Being the not really giving a shit kind of guy, I just ignored it again. After all, I do not know anyone and have not known anyone in my lifetime by the name of Randy. Pretty logical to not answer. I would just be wasting my time. About an hour and a half passes by. It's about 11 p.m. now. I get the call yet again, so I answered. And literally, the call goes exactly the same way as before. With one problem. I think I ended up saying too much. I add to the conversation. Sorry, you really have the wrong number. I don't know any Randys.
Oh, you don't know me.
That's right. Here I'm thinking he finally gets it and he's going to stop calling. But then he says this.
Well then, I guess I'm going to stop by and I think you'll get a pretty good idea of who I am when I'm done with you.
At this point I was instantly freaked out and I just hung up. I was getting kind of scared, but I got a grip on myself and just figured that he must have beef with someone and really doesn't get that he's calling the wrong person. A few minutes later, I hear a vehicle pull into my driveway. Since I live in the basement and there is a window facing the driveway, his headlights were shining right in. I figured it was my neighbor coming home from his night shift at the hospital. I live in a triplex. A few minutes pass by and the lights are still on. Quickly, it all came flooding back into my mind. It's him, I thought, and my stomach began to knot. I felt so afraid. My hands began to tremble. I peeked through the curtains and watched the car for quite some time. I couldn't tell if there was anyone inside or not, since the headlights were bright. He doesn't leave, so I called my brother, who lives not far from me. I told him what happened and he said, "Okay, stay in your house, keep the door locked. I'm coming to get you, man." Now my brother is a pretty intimidating guy if you've never met him before. 6'4", broad shoulders, big badass looking beard, etc. He comes over, I let him in and he says, "There's nobody in the car, yet the headlights are on." I pack up some things and we head off. He was kind enough to let me stay at his place for a few days until I felt okay. Upon returning to my apartment today, the same vehicle is in my driveway. I started freaking out, but there's nobody in the car. I noticed blankets on all the seats. For some reason, I looked in the opposite direction, right at my garbage bin. And it is my bin. It is labeled, and it has the words, "It's me" written on it. I quickly went into my apartment and locked the door and took a shower. When I got out, the car was gone. Now I'm writing this. Honestly, I'm pretty fucking scared right now. I moved in with my grandparents after college and was sleeping upstairs. I was working a part-time job with weird hours, so I would often sleep in on my days off. One morning I was sleeping in and without a knock at my bedroom door, my grandpa walks in. Now I normally sleep in the buff and it was a summer, so I wasn't exactly completely covered. But my grandpa gets a quick sight of me and I see him. And he's holding the phone. Needless to say, I'm a little freaked out. I wonder what my grandpa is up to. So I get dressed and go downstairs, where my grandpa is telling someone on the phone to go to hell. Apparently someone had learned what I sounded like and was doing their best to imitate me on the phone. They had claimed that the night before, when I actually had to work, I had gotten into a horrific car accident and needed their help. Needless to say, we were on edge for a bit after that. They tried doing something similar with my uncle's voice, but my grandparents had wised up and asked some trivia about his pets. which they promptly failed. We're fairly certain that it was a couple of scam artists trying to get at senior citizens. But the fact that they were able to imitate my voice and my uncle's voice so clearly was incredibly fucking creepy. My grandparents contacted the police and changed their phone number, so they haven't heard back from them, but I'm still curious as to who it was and how they learned some certain things. They actually knew one of my uncle's pet's name from back in the day. It all started when I was 14, so 7 or so years ago. My relationship at the time had just ended badly, and an older female friend of mine had promised to call and comfort me. I sat up till 2 or 3 a.m. waiting for a call I should have assumed was no longer coming. So at this dead of night, my phone finally rings. Assuming it was Jessie, I picked up the phone and started having a conversation with her about what was going on. That's when I heard the voice. It was scratchy and deeper than hers. I don't even know how to describe it, though to this day, I can remember it. The voice kind of went along with what I was saying. So I finally decided to ask, "Your voice sounds odd." They quickly responded,
"Oh, I caught a cold."
Okay, I thought. I was pretty sure it wasn't Jessie at this point, but was interested to hear how this was going to play out. So I went along with it. The first thing this voice asked me is what I look like. I laughed and responded, "No different than I looked earlier today when you last saw me." The voice responded making some excuse that her mind was blurry and she couldn't remember, so I should describe myself. So I did so, in detail. Then I decided to ask, "You're not Jessie, are you?" Of course they denied it, but I asked a couple more times, comforting them with the fact that I wouldn't be upset if this individual was not Jessie. I was just curious as to who I was talking to. Finally, he told me his name was Jack. Now at this time, I was almost absolutely sure I did not know a Jack. So I asked him how he got my number. He told me he got it from a girl at a party. It must have been a fake number, but I sounded nicer anyways. I don't know why, but I right away assumed this was one of my friends or a girl from school, being an ass and handing out my number. So I asked him what she looked like. He quickly told me he couldn't remember. So anyway, I started to talk to this Jack. He asked me how old I was. I told him and asked him back. He told me he was 24 or something. There was a drastic age gap between us, but not enough to off-put me. He asked me personal questions, the first being what I was wearing. I was naive and described the cute little pajamas I had on. I didn't know exactly why he would want to hear about my pajamas with cats on them. Then he asked me what school I went to. I told him, and he told me he lived in Little Italy, which was actually extremely close to my school. He asked me what bus I took home, and I was dumb enough to tell him. He told me there was a high possibility he had seen me on the bus before. This actually was the first thing to make me a little nervous, so we talked a little bit more. He told me I should come over sometime, and then I went to bed. So every couple months I would receive a phone call from him. They were always at inappropriate times in the night. They started with asking me what I was wearing. He would then describe girls that looked like me he saw on the bus, told me what they were wearing when he saw them, and asked me if it was me. They never were as far as I was aware of. Then he'd always say,
"I'm having a party. You should come over."
And I'd ask him why he was on the phone if he had people over. He would then say,
"I'm having a party for one."
Or,
"I'm having a party for two. Just me and you."
He at this point seriously scared me, but I was just too naive to speak up. I told my friends about him. The boys I knew joked that they would show up to these parties and teach him a lesson, but I didn't want anyone hurt. For all I knew, he could just be a lonely guy looking for a friend. Or worse, he could be big and scary and my friends could get themselves in trouble. So I just laughed and told them not to. Well, one day I was at the mall with a particularly protective female friend of mine. She was my best friend and had kind of taken it on herself to be my older sister. and protect me from the creeps out there. So anyway, midday, as I'm at the mall, I get a call from him. When she asked me who was on the phone, she told me to hand it to her. She then went on to ask him if he knew how old I was. She told me he was creepy for calling a 14-year-old girl, and she would not hesitate to hunt him down and hurt him if he continued. So I didn't hear from Jack for a while. I thought he was gone for good. There was this night I was having a sleepover with my protective friend and another girl. As we were going to bed at 3 or 4 in the morning, my phone rings. Without hesitation or thought, I pick it up. The voice is Jack's. He starts talking to me and I'm speechless. I guess fear just painted my face because my friend turned around and our eyes met, and I just knew to throw her my phone. She put it to her ear and starts. I don't know if it was screaming or just the most threatening tone I'd ever heard, but repeating, "I told you not to call here. How dare you call? You know she's 14, right?" And then a lot of cussing and screaming. Through the whole time I could hear his now shaken voice pleading,
"Could I talk to the first girl? I want to talk to the first girl again. Let me talk to the first girl."
My friend spent what seemed like at least half an hour ignoring every word out of his mouth and yelling at him, calling him a pervert and refusing his pleas. After that, he never called again. On a side note, months or maybe a year or two later, my mother and I were down in Little Italy. This was rare for us to come down this particular street, and I couldn't get Jack out of my head. I was spooked and the evidence laid on my facial expressions. Until my mom finally asked what had me on pins and needles. I told her there was a guy named Jack who lived down here who scared me. As I said that name, her expression changed. She appeared more worried than I was. She explained when she was very young she worked in an old toy store in Little Italy. The manager of the store was in his early 30s back then and named Jack. There was always something off about Jack. The way he looked at kids, the way he treated his teenage employees. My mom told me she quit because she felt there was something very wrong about him. She described him to me and well, there were lots of similarities. It's hard to say if it was possible that Jack I knew over the phone was the same Jack who ran the toy store. I mean, there has to be lots of Jacks out there, right? Still, the coincidence was spooky. I have been lurking here for a long time and I posted an encounter once under a throwaway, but I just remembered this one and thought I would share. In 2012, I was living in a suburb of a small city with my boyfriend and 2 daughters in an apartment complex in a pretty nice neighborhood. I was attending college and my boyfriend worked in the city, but because I was a young mother in college, I didn't really have a lot of friends at school, and the majority of my friends and family lived about an hour away. One weeknight at about 2 to 3 a.m., I woke up to my phone ringing from a restricted number, and it was a woman crying, "It's your mom. Please come get me." I immediately got up and started getting dressed. My mom has had problems with drugs in the past and I love her, but I wouldn't put it past her to get herself out of a bad situation. As I mentioned, my family lived about an hour away, but I knew she had friends near me. I was too tired and alarmed to really worry about why she had called me unrestricted. "Where are you?" I asked, and she replied that she was in the city close to me. I pressed her for more details and she just kept saying, "Please hurry, come get me now." For some reason it started to seem suspicious. The voice was cracking and it sounded less like my mother and more like a man trying to disguise his voice. And they were pushing too hard for me to just leave my apartment and start driving without any general direction to head in. Whoever it was just kept saying that I needed to leave right now, and I think they may have said something about a car breaking down or that they were waiting for me in a car. At the time, my mom didn't have a car or very reliable access to transportation, so in a moment of clarity, I grasped onto it and I asked, as nonchalantly as possible, "Are you in your car or somebody else's?" They said,
"I'm in my car. Have you left?"
I screamed, "My mom doesn't even have a car, you fucking psycho!" and hung up. My boyfriend was awake by this point, and he said that I should have played along once I knew it wasn't my mother, so he could go out and find out who it was. But I was too shaken up at the moment to do anything but respond with absolute anger. I never found out who it was. They called back a few minutes later, and my boyfriend answered the phone, and whoever it was just breathed into it for a while before hanging up. Whoever the fuck called me that night, let's not meet. I was a junior in high school, and my mother and I were hiding out in a hotel in a nearby town from her abusive husband. He had assaulted her in a violent rage a couple days prior, in front of his family even, and the cops hadn't caught him yet. And I was out of town at the time. We didn't tell anybody exactly where we were, just that we were in a hotel. So on the second night, my mom and I were just hanging out when suddenly the hotel phone started ringing. We both looked at each other and my heart dropped. She muted the TV and we just sat and watched the phone ring until it stopped. We waited a moment before my mom called the front desk. The room was so quiet that I could hear the conversation. "Hi, I was wondering if I had just received a phone call."
"Yes, you did."
"Was it a man?"
"Yes."
"Did he have an accent?"
"Yes, Texan."
"He was from Texas." She looked at me for a moment. "Where did the call come from?"
"Another room in the hotel."
We immediately had the front desk call the police. While we waited for them to show up, we hid between our two beds. We were on the first floor, had no idea where he was, if he knew where we were, or if he had a shotgun that we knew he had access to. Police came quickly and arrested him in a room above and 2 rooms down from where we were. He had been texting my mom that night creepy things about our cars and how we were trapped idiots. He also had been calling the front desk to get them to come to our doors so he could find us. The hotel was built with an interior balcony so you could see the first floor from the second. This whole evening still gives me shivers.